When I pushed open the master bedroom door, Lila Bennett was lying on the bed Ethan Carter and I had shared for 3 years. Wearing my wedding dress, she had my crystal-encrusted veil on her head and held the lily-of-the-valley bouquet I'd carried on our wedding day. Her skirt spread across the entire bed. Like a carefully orchestrated humiliation, Ethan stood beside her, half-crouched as he adjusted the hem of her dress. At the sound of the door opening, he turned and saw me. His first reaction wasn't to stand up, nor to explain. It was to frown. "What are you doing back early?" I stood in the doorway for 3 seconds, forgetting even to set down my suitcase. I'd flown back to Portland from a business trip and driven straight home with my blueprints and fabric swatches, skipping the Amtrak station entirely, just to surprise him. Instead, I was the one who got the shock. Lila lifted her eyes to me. There was a flash of panic first, then her gaze softened quickly. "Charlotte, don't misunderstand. I just..." "Take it off." I cut her off. My voice wasn't loud, but the room fell silent instantly. Lila bit her lip, her fingers twisting nervously at the lace on the bodice of the dress. Her eyes turned red as if on cue. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize you'd mind this much. Ethan said you never wear it anyway. That it was just sitting there gathering dust. I only wanted to try it on." I stared at her and suddenly felt ridiculous. "You tried on a wedding dress in my bed." Ethan stood up, his tone sharp with impatience. "Charlotte, don't come home being sarcastic. Lila's wedding was cancelled next month. She's not in a good place. She just borrowed it to feel something." Feel something. I finally set down my suitcase. The wheels hit the doorframe with a dull thud. "Ethan, do you even hear yourself?" His frown deepened. "Is it really that big of a deal? It's just a dress. Just a dress." Those 5 words were like a blunt knife, slowly carving into my chest. That dress wasn't bought. I'd made it myself, stitch by stitch, from the initial designs, to choosing the fabric, to the draping and cutting. Every part was my work. The final row of hidden embroidery along the hem was the last thing my mother ever sewed. From her hospital bed, her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the needle. But she insisted on tucking every loose thread away neatly. She said a woman didn't need a grand wedding, but her wedding dress deserved to be cherished, because sewn into every stitch was the heart she was willing to give to someone else. Before she died, she'd touched that dress and said one thing: "Charlotte, if anyone ever makes you take off this dress in tears, you make them leave." Ethan knew that. He knew what that dress meant to me. He knew I never let anyone touch it. Yet here he was, bringing Lila into our bedroom, letting her wear that dress, lie in our bed. I stared at him, asking each word slowly and clearly. "Did you tell her to put it on?" His expression flickered, and he looked away. "She was upset. I was just trying to cheer her up." "So you used my things to cheer her up?" "Charlotte, don't be so petty." I looked at that face, so familiar to me, and suddenly felt a strange sense of unreality. You really can look at someone you've loved for 7 years and not recognize them in an instant. Layla, sensing the tension, scrambled to sit up. Her veil slipped off her shoulder, and she looked at me with those soft, vulnerable eyes. "Charlotte, this is all my fault. I just loved that dress so much. Don't fight with Ethan. He only let me come over to take my mind off things after the breakup." She paused, her voice dropping even lower. "I promise. There's nothing between Ethan and me." She shouldn't have said that. The way she said Ethan made my stomach turn. Ethan had never let me call him that. Said it was too sappy. But since Lila came back, he'd let her get away with everything. Even the way she said his name. I walked slowly over and picked up the phone lying on the bed. The screen was still lit, showing the camera app. They'd been taking photos, using my dress, my bed, my room, to give his first love the wedding photos she never got. I held up the phone and pressed the shutter, pointing it at Lila. Click. Ethan's face changed instantly, and he lunged for the phone. "What are you doing?" I stepped back, out of his reach, and glanced down at the photo. It was ironic. In the frame, Lila wore my one-of-a-kind wedding dress, lying in the bed I'd slept in for 3 years. Pale-faced and teary-eyed, she looked like a princess who'd just been granted her wish. And I looked like the villain who'd stumbled in and ruined everything. I looked up at Ethan. Evidence for the divorce. His face drained of color. Charlotte, don't call me that. I tossed the faux knee back onto the bed and pointed at Lila. You will take that dress off now. Lila flinched as if I'd scared her, and looked to Ethan for help. Ethan stepped forward, putting himself between us, his voice cold. She's not in a good place right now. Do you have to push her? I laughed. Bitter and sharp. Her mental state is none of my business. Ethan, if a man was lying here instead, would you tell me he was heartbroken and just needed to borrow my bed? His jaw tightened. Don't be crude. Crude. I stared at him. You did the crude thing. Don't get mad when someone says it out loud. Tears finally spilled down Lila's cheeks. Charlotte, I really didn't mean to upset you. I was so jealous of you. Ethan always said you were the best wedding dress designer in the world. When I saw that dress, I fell in love with it. I was out of line. I'll take it off now. As she spoke, she fumbled with the laces at the back, her fingers deliberately shaking so much she couldn't undo them. Tears dripped onto the dress. Ethan grabbed her hand to stop her. Don't. I'll do it. And with that, he turned and started untying the laces of my wedding dress for another woman. In that moment, the last bit of warmth in my heart died completely. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, watching my husband undress another woman in my wedding dress. Lila turned her back, exposing her pale shoulders. Ethan's fingers moved over the laces gently, as if handling something fragile. He'd undone my wedding dress exactly like that once. On our wedding night, he'd wrapped his arms around me from behind, his nose brushing my ear, and whispered, Charlotte, that dress is beautiful. But you're more beautiful. I'd believed him, which is why I now felt like the biggest fool who ever lived. The dress slipped off her slowly. I stared at the hem, and sure enough, there was a clear foundation stain on the left side of the waist. 2 threads had been pulled loose from the edge of the tulle. My breath caught, and my heart felt like it was being squeezed in a fist. Ethan took off her veil and looked up. Meeting my eyes, he must have seen how pale I was, because he paused, his voice softening slightly. Charlotte, Lila didn't mean it. I'll have it cleaned. If it's damaged, I'll have it repaired. I looked at him and asked slowly, do you know why I never sent this dress to the cleaners? He blinked. Because that hidden embroidery around the waist was the last thing my mother ever sewed. That tulle can't be washed. It can't be repressed. If it's broken, it's broken forever. I stared at those 2 loose threads and smiled faintly. But you let her wear it anyway. Ethan's face went rigid. Layla, as if only now realizing the gravity of what she'd done, looked at me with red eyes. Charlotte, I really didn't know. You did know. I fixed my gaze on her, my voice unnaturally calm. You came to my studio in college. You sat right there eating grapes while my mother sewed that hem. The color drained from her face. Ethan frowned. Layla, you knew. Her lips trembled, but she couldn't say a word. In that moment, I understood everything. She hadn't done it by accident. She'd done it on purpose. Wearing my dress, lying in my bed, using the most disgusting way possible to test just how much she meant to Ethan. And Ethan, even though he knew she was crossing every line, had let her. I bent down and ripped the dress off Lila. She stumbled forward, and Ethan caught her instinctively, turning to snap at me. Charlotte, are you insane? Yes, I am. I hugged the dress to my chest and stepped back, looking at the 2 of them. They looked perfect together. One playing the fragile victim, the other the devoted protector, and I was just the unnecessary joke standing between them. Go ahead, I said, clutching the dress tighter. This room, this bed, this man, whoever wants them can have them. Starting today. Ethan's face changed drastically. What are you saying? I looked at him, my voice soft. Ethan, I want a divorce. The room fell silent. Layla froze for a second. Then a flicker of triumph crossed her eyes. Gone so fast you'd miss it if you blinked. But she recovered quickly, grabbing Ethan's sleeve, trembling with panic. Ethan, please explain. Don't let Charlotte divorce you over this. I'll never forgive myself if that happens. Ethan didn't look at her. He stared at me. Are you done throwing a tantrum? A tantrum. You know Lila's not stable right now. So what? I laughed. She's unstable. So I have to lend her my wedding dress, let her sleep in my bed, and lend her my husband to cheer her up too. Charlotte. Ethan. I said his full name for the first time. Did you really think I'd never stand up for myself? His Adam's apple bobbed, as if he wanted to say something, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned and walked out, holding the dress. Before I left the bedroom, I glanced back at the bed. The sheets were crumpled, and there was a lipstick stain on the pillow. My stomach turned, and I slammed the master bedroom door shut. The door shook, like the first toll of a bell for our marriage. I carried the dress to the walk-in closet. As soon as I laid it flat on the counter, my heart sank. The foundation stain on the waist was worse than I'd thought. The tulle had been crushed by high heels, leaving a fine web of cracks. Worst of all, there was a drop of red wine on the lining of the skirt. I stared at that red stain for a full 30 seconds. Memories of our wedding day flashed before my eyes. That night, during the toasts, Ethan had kept me close, shielding my dress from every passing guest, taking drink after drink for me. He'd lifted the hem of my skirt and said, "Walk slowly, don't step on it. It breaks my heart to see it dirty." So he did know how to care about something. His care was just cheap enough to give to anyone he felt sorry for. Footsteps sounded behind me. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching me hold the dress. His brow furrowed deeply. Lila didn't mean it. I didn't turn around. You came here to apologize for her. I came to explain. Fine. Explain. He was silent for a few seconds, choosing his words carefully. Lila's been in a terrible state since the breakup. She was supposed to shoot her wedding trailer next week, and now the whole project's fallen apart. She came over for dinner today, saw the dress, said she loved it and wanted to try it on. I was scared she'd hurt herself, so I said yes. Scared she'd hurt herself. I repeated the words and laughed. Ethan, you've always been so good at caring about people. Charlotte, I know this crossed a line, but it's not as bad as you're making it out to be. Then what is bad? In your book. He looked at me, genuinely confused by my reaction. She just tried on a dress. I finally turned to face him. That wasn't just a dress. That was my wedding dress. The last thing my mother ever made for me. The thing you promised you'd keep safe for me forever. You used it to cheer her up. And you say it was just a dress. Ethan looked uncomfortable for a moment, but then he frowned again and said, I admit I didn't think this through, but she's already been through enough. Do you have to keep harping on it? I stared at him for a long time, long enough for that flicker of discomfort to turn back into impatience. I suddenly didn't want to argue anymore. Arguing with someone who's biased is just forcing them to admit they're biased. And bias doesn't need to be admitted. It's written in every hoist they make. Ethan, I said, my voice flat. Do you know what the worst part is? He frowned slightly. It's not that Lila tried to hurt me. It's that you knew she was trying to hurt me. And you still thought I should be the bigger person. Ethan froze. I folded the dress back into its dust cover and zipped it up slowly. Get out. Charlotte, I don't want to see you right now. Ethan didn't move, probably because I was too calm. And that made him nervous. He said quietly, You didn't mean that about divorce, did you? You're just angry. My hands paused on the zipper. Then I looked up at him. I did mean it. I'm very serious. That night, I didn't go back to the master bedroom. I took the dress to the guest room and locked the door. My phone rang almost immediately. It was my best friend Sam Wilson. Babe, your flight was supposed to get in at 5. Are you home yet? I leaned against the door, my throat tight, and managed a small hum. Sam heard the difference in my voice instantly. What's wrong? Did Ethan hurt you? I was silent for a few seconds, then said, Lila was wearing my wedding dress, lying in my bed. There was dead silence on the other end for 3 seconds. Then a string of curses exploded through the phone. Holy shit. Charlotte. Where are you right now? I'm coming over. Don't. I closed my eyes. Exhausted. My head's a mess. A mess. This is crystal clear. Your husband's lost his mind. And his first love is even worse. This isn't just trying on a dress. This is her rubbing it in your face. She'd always been blunt. But today her words hit home perfectly. I wanted to laugh. But I couldn't. Sam took a deep breath on the other end. Listen to me. You can't let this slide. The fact that she dared to do this means she's sure Ethan will protect her. If you back down now, next time she'll be wearing your pajamas and sleeping next to your husband. I stared at the dust cover in my arms and said softly, I asked for a divorce. Sam was silent for a second. Then her voice turned serious. This time for real. For real. Good. She said decisively. Then don't try to handle this alone. Come to my office first thing tomorrow. I'll go through everything: property, shares, trademarks, copyrights, all of it. Charlotte. You spend all your time making wedding dresses and you're too nice. When someone stabs you, you can't just sew yourself back up and pretend it didn't happen. My nose stung, and I hummed quietly. I hung up the phone and sat on the edge of the guest bed, holding the dress, staring into space all night. At 2 in the morning, there was a soft knock on the door. Ethan's voice came from outside. Charlotte, open the door. We need to talk. I didn't say anything. He knocked again. At least eat something first. Listening to his low voice, I only felt irony. He'd always been so proper. Even when he'd done something wrong, he'd act like he was willing to fix it. But he never understood that some things can't be fixed with a bowl of food and a soft voice. I ignored him. After a long time, the hallway went quiet. But before I could relax, I heard soft sobbing from the living room. It was Lila. She was crying quietly, her breath coming in gasps, like she was about to hyperventilate. Then I heard Ethan rush out of the master bedroom. Layla, what's wrong? Did I make Charlotte hate me? Ethan, I really didn't mean it. I just saw that dress and I was so jealous. I thought I'd get to wear a wedding dress too. She broke down crying. Ethan's voice softened. This isn't your fault. I should have handled it better. But what about Charlotte? If she divorces you over this, what will I do? She won't, Ethan said quietly. She's just angry. She'll get over it in a couple of days. I sat behind the door, listening to them talk, my nails digging into my palms until they left crescent marks. So in his mind, my divorce was just a tantrum. He was so sure I'd never leave him. And why wouldn't he be? We'd known each other for 7 years, married for 3. I'd been with him through the hardest days of his startup, all the way to when the company finally took off, when he needed money. I'd used my studio's revenue to keep him afloat. When he needed connections, I'd taken my work to every event and stayed up late networking with him. When he had stomach problems, I'd gotten up at 3 in the morning to make him chicken noodle soup. When his mother was in the hospital, I'd stayed with her for 2 weeks straight, working on designs during the day and sitting with her at night. I'd been so reliable, so steady, so much the perfect wife who never complained. So he'd forgotten that I could hurt too, that I could get angry, that I could leave. When I opened the guest room door the next morning, Layla was gone from the living room. Ethan was sitting at the dining table, with a bowl of oatmeal and a fried egg in front of him. When he saw me, he looked relieved and stood up. Come eat something. I didn't move. Where's Lila? She was upset last night. I had the driver take her home. I nodded. To her place. Or to the apartment you rented for her. Ethan's face went rigid. I looked at him. And the last bit of hope I'd been holding on to died. Yesterday I'd thought maybe Lila was just visiting more often. Maybe there wasn't as much going on as I feared. But now I knew. There was an apartment. And he'd never even planned to tell me. You've been checking up on me. He stared at me, his face darkening. I didn't have to, I said dryly. It's written all over your face when you're lying. Ethan was silent for a moment, then admitted it. There is an apartment. Lila had nowhere to stay when she came back. I helped her rent it. Helped her. I looked at him. With what money? Ethan, was that your money? Or our marital property? He frowned. Do we have to talk about this right now? How should I talk about it then? I walked over to the table and looked at the bowl of oatmeal. I thought about them in the living room last night. Him comforting her while I sat in the guest room holding my damaged dress until dawn. I picked up the bowl and poured it straight into the trash can. Ethan's face turned cold instantly. Charlotte, don't cook for me. I set the empty bowl down on the table with a clink. Everything you make tastes like betrayal. He took a deep breath, clearly trying to control his temper. Fine, be angry. But the company's anniversary show is next week. You can't throw a fit now. Layla was supposed to be our closing model. When that fell through, I was just trying to see if the dress would work for her. I looked at him and almost laughed. Even now, the first thing he cared about was the show. So you let her wear my wedding dress for the company. Not just that. He paused. That dress really suits her. That sentence made me sick to my stomach. If it suits her so much, make her one. Don't touch mine. Ethan's eyes flashed with annoyance. Charlotte, don't you think you're being unreasonable right now? Unreasonable. I nodded. Fine. Let me be more unreasonable. I pulled out my phone and called Sam right in front of him. Send the divorce papers to my email. Ethan's face changed completely. You're actually serious about this. What did you think, Charlotte? Don't forget that Blossom Thread isn't just yours anymore. Blossom Thread was the wedding dress studio my mother had left me. The couture brand we built together over the years. He ran the business and handled the funding. I did the designs and the patterns. Everyone said we were the perfect partners, that we understood each other better than anyone. Looking back now, it was all so ironic. I haven't forgotten, I said, my voice calm to the point of cruelty, which is why I'm also going after you for embezzling marital property, misusing company resources, and using my personal work without permission. Ethan stared at me, shocked. What are you talking about? Exactly what I said. I turned to go back to my room. Ethan, stop treating me like just your wife. I'm Charlotte first, and your wife second. If you push me too far, you'll find out that I can make wedding dresses. And I can also tear marriages apart. An hour later, I packed my suitcase and left that house. Before I left, I took everything that belonged to me from the master bedroom. The moon lamp I'd picked out for the bedside table. Gone. The pearl comb my mother had left me on the dresser. Gone. The satin heels I'd worn on our wedding day. Gone. Finally, I stood by the bed and looked down at the fresh sheets. Ethan thought changing the sheets would make it like nothing had happened. But he didn't understand that some stains don't stay on fabric. They stay in your heart. I stared for 2 seconds, then turned and walked out. In the living room, Ethan's mother, Margaret Carter, walked in just as I was leaving. She was carrying a thermos. When she saw me with my suitcase, she frowned. What are you throwing a fit about now? I ignored her and kept walking. She put the thermos down on the shoe rack and hurried to block my way. I just heard from Ethan. It's just a dress. Is it really worth leaving home over? I stopped and looked at her. Mrs. Carter, that was my wedding dress. So what? It's not an antique, she said matter-of-factly. That poor girl Lila got dumped right before her wedding. What's wrong with her trying on a dress? You're the legal wife. Can't you just be the bigger person? I listened to her finish and smiled. You know that was my wedding dress. And you know I'm the legal wife. So who do you think should be the bigger person when your son lets his first love wear my wedding dress and sleep in my bed? Margaret's face darkened. Don't be so rude. Lila and Ethan grew up together. They have a history. Is it so wrong for him to take care of her? Grew up together. A history. So in my mother-in-law's eyes, that old history was more important than her son's legal wife. I looked at her and realized for the first time why this family worked so well together. Fine. I nodded. If their history is so special, then let the woman with the history spend the rest of her life with your son. My lawyers will be in touch about Blossom Thread. I dragged my suitcase toward the door. Margaret raised her voice angrily behind me. Charlotte, Don't be ungrateful. Ethan's been good to you. If you hadn't married him, you'd still be some nobody making dresses in a tiny studio. Those words stung like a needle. I turned and looked at her arrogant face, saying each word slowly and clearly. Mrs. Carter, I think you have it backwards. It wasn't Ethan who gave me everything I have. It was me who gave Ethan the life he's so proud of. With that, I walked out the door without looking back. The wind in the hallway was cold, making my eyes burn, but I didn't turn around, not even once. When I got to Sam's law office, I took the dress out of its dust cover and laid it flat on her long conference table. Sam saw the foundation stain and the pulled threads, and her face turned black. She did this on purpose. I know. Did Ethan protect her? Yeah. Sam cursed and immediately called her assistant to bring gloves and a camera. First, we preserve the evidence. Take photos of every detail: stains, pulls, damage. Do you have photos of the bedroom? I do. I sent her the photo I'd taken the night before. Lila in the wedding dress on the bed. Ethan standing beside her, looking at her with such tenderness. Sam looked at it and snorted. This should be framed and hung over Ethan's desk as a reminder. She looked up at me. The most important decision now is how far you want to take this. Just the divorce, or do you want to take down the company too? I looked at the dress on the table and ran my fingers over the damaged tool. After a long time, I said, take it down. Then don't hold back. Sam pushed a shareholding structure chart toward me. You own 45%. Ethan owns 35%. The rest is investors and the employee pool. It sounds like you have the upper hand. But the problem is you've been too nice over the years. You gave the company exclusive long-term rights to all your designs. And a lot of the contracts are loose. If Ethan wants to drag this out, it won't be easy. Then let him drag it out. And the marital property. She circled something on the paper with her pen. Houses, cars, investments aside. The biggest problem is the company's expenses over the past year. You mentioned that apartment for Lila. I suggest we check the bank statements first. If Ethan used company funds or our joint account to pay for it, this will be a lot easier. I nodded. Check everything. Also. Sam paused, looking at me carefully. You need to be prepared for this. For what? That your husband's feelings for Lila didn't start yesterday. I fell silent. I didn't need Sam to tell me that. I'd known it deep down all along. Lila was Ethan's first love. The girl he'd wanted more than anything when he was young, but had never gotten. Lila and I had been roommates in college. She was beautiful, spoiled, and loved being the center of attention. Ethan had chased her for 2 years, brought her breakfast every morning, saved her the window seat in the back of the lecture hall, ran through the rain to bring her an umbrella. But Lila had never said yes. She'd strung him along, enjoying his attention without ever giving him anything in return. Then the year we graduated, she'd left the country without a word. Ethan had stood in the rain outside our dorm building all night. The next day he had a fever of 104F. That's how I'd met Ethan. Not because I felt sorry for him, but because he was starting his business and needed connections in the wedding dress Sue PPLY chain. And my mother's studio was looking to expand. We started as business partners, and slowly fell in love. The day he proposed, he held my hand and said, "The past is the past. From now on, you're the only one for me." I'd believed him. So when we got married, I never even asked about Lila. I thought the past was just the past. Now I know better. Some people aren't gone. They're just hidden away, under a thin layer of glass. They look safe until they come back. And then they can make a man lose his mind in an instant. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, Sam got the first batch of bank statements. When she turned the laptop toward me, I didn't even blink. Since Lila had come back, Ethan had transferred her a total of 47,000. The description said rent, medical expenses, deposit, shooting compensation. The largest transfer was 20,000. The note said, wedding cancellation fee. Sam stared at the screen and cursed. Unbelievable. She's not just his first love, she's a goddess he's worshipping. I looked at the numbers, my chest tight. The most ironic part. 3 months earlier, I'd wanted to buy a new French embroidery machine. And Ethan had told me cash flow was tight and I should wait. It wasn't that the company didn't have money. It was that his money had more important places to go. Keep checking. My voice was hoarse. Check the company expense reports too. Sam nodded, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Half an hour later, the next blow landed. Lila's therapy bills from last month had been filed under client entertainment. Her flights and hotel for a trip to Miami had been filed under market research. The cancellation fee for her commercial shoot had been filed under brand PR maintenance. Sam whistled through her teeth. Ethan's really got some nerve. I didn't say anything. I just printed out every page of those reports. The paper came out of the printer with a soft rustling sound. It sounded like my 3-year marriage being torn apart. Inch by inch. Sam looked at my pale face and said carefully, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." I organized the papers and put them in a file folder. If he's willing to spend all this money on her, he can pay it back with interest. That night, when I got back to my temporary apartment and got out of the shower, a push notification popped up on my phone. Exclusive. Mysterious new campaign from iconic wedding dress brand Blossom Thread New Muse revealed. My heart sank. I tapped on it. The first photo made my fingers go cold. It was a beautifully shot atmospheric photo. The model's face wasn't visible, only her jawline and collarbone. The wedding dress she was wearing was bathed in soft light, like a cloud, but no one else would recognize it. I would. That was my wedding dress. The hidden embroidery around the waist was one of a kind. The comments were going crazy. Is this the closing look for the anniversary show? It's stunning. This model has such a different vibe, total first love energy. I heard the owner is also the designer. Is this her? Nah. The owner never posts photos. This is definitely someone new. I stared at that photo, my breathing heavy. I'd moved out of the house the night before, and tonight, my wedding dress was the lead in Blossom Thread's trending teaser. I didn't have to guess who'd done it. I called Ethan immediately. He answered on the second ring. Saw the trending topic. His voice was flat. "Ethan, did you use my wedding dress for marketing?" "It's just a mood shot to test the market reaction." "Who gave you permission?" "Charlotte." He sounded tired. "Don't mix business with personal matters. The anniversary show is coming up, and Lila's perfect for this dress. A little pre-show buzz is good for the brand." I stood by the window, my fingers tightening around the phone. That's my personal wedding dress. Not a company sample, but it was just sitting in the closet. Just because it was in the closet doesn't mean it's yours. There was a silence on the other end. Then Ethan said quietly, "Lila's already getting enough hate online. Don't target her anymore." I laughed out loud. "I'm targeting her. Ethan, you let her wear my wedding dress, sleep in my bed, spend my money, use my work for a trending topic, and now you're telling me I'm targeting her." His voice turned cold. "Charlotte, I've been more than patient with you." "Then don't be." I said each word clearly. "Take down all photos of the dress immediately. Issue a public apology. And stop giving Lila any more money. Otherwise, I'll send you a cease and desist letter tomorrow. You wouldn't dare try me." I hung up the phone. 10 minutes later, I had Sam's firm send an official letter demanding that Blossom Thread stop using my personal wedding dress without permission and preserve all evidence of infringement. 2 hours later, the trending photo was deleted, but it was too late. Everyone who needed to see it had already seen it. The next morning, when I arrived at my studio, there were several reporters camped outside the door. The flashbulbs went off, and I knew something was wrong. "Ms. Hale, is the dress in last night's trending topic your personal wedding dress? Is it true that you and Mr. Carter are getting divorced? What is the real relationship between Ms. Bennett and Mr. Carter?" I didn't stop. The security guards held the reporters back, and Sam got out of her car and pulled me into the elevator. When the elevator doors closed, her face was grim. "Someone's feeding the story." "I know." I looked at the endless paparazzi videos popping up on my phone, and the captions underneath them. They're trying to force me to make a statement. Should we respond? Yes. I looked at the headline that said Old Love Returns. New wife steps aside and smiled faintly. If they want a show, let's give them a show they'll never forget. That afternoon, I had my studio's official account post a statement. It was only 3 sentences. The dress in last night's trending topic is my personal property. No one has the right to wear, photograph, or distribute it without my permission. I have retained legal counsel to handle all related infringement and marital dispute matters. Also, the same goes for the bed. That third sentence broke the internet. The comments hit 100,000 in an hour. The same goes for the bed. Oh my god. The tea. So the first love didn't just wear the wedding dress. She slept in the bed too. This wife is iconic. No screaming. No explaining. Just straight to lawyers. Who else is obsessed with this energy? No drama. Just consequences. An hour after the statement went up, Ethan burst into my studio. I'd never seen him so disheveled. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, and his eyes were blazing with anger. Who told you to post that? I was at the pattern-making table, adjusting the waist of a mermaid dress, and didn't even look up. I did. Do you have any idea what this is doing to Lila? She's getting torn apart online. I put down my scissors and finally looked at him. She deserves it. Ethan's chest heaved with anger. Can you stop being so cruel? Cruel. I looked at him calmly. Ethan, you have it backwards. It wasn't my statement that made people hate her. It was her wearing my wedding dress and posting it online. It was you letting her use my things to play the victim. She didn't sleep all night. Everyone's calling her a homewrecker. Isn't she? She's not. Ethan said through gritted teeth. Nothing happened between us. I stared at him for 2 seconds and laughed. A man who's truly innocent doesn't rent an apartment for another woman, pay her wedding cancellation fees, give her his wife's wedding dress to fulfill her dreams, and worry more about her getting hate online than his own wife getting a divorce. Ethan, just because you didn't sleep with her doesn't mean you didn't cheat. He turned pale, unable to say anything for a long time. Finally, he managed. When did you become like this? Like what? Like a porcupine, lashing out at everyone. No. I looked at him, my voice soft. I just finally stopped being the Charlotte who let you walk all over her to save face. He stood there, the anger fading from his face, replaced by a look of confusion I'd never seen before. Charlotte. I just wanted to help her. Why can't you understand that? I almost laughed at that. He actually had the nerve to ask me why I couldn't understand. Ethan, I said, tearing the adjusted waistline off the dress. The fabric made a soft ripping sound under my fingers. Do you know what the real problem is? It's not that Lila came back. It's that as soon as she came back, you expected me to be the understanding one. You feel sorry for her when she's heartbroken. You comfort her when she's sad. She says she likes something, and you give her my wedding dress. But what about me? When I'm upset, you tell me to tough it out. When the company is busy, you tell me to make sacrifices. When your mother gives me a hard time, you tell me to let it go. And now that you're in love with your ex again, you want me to understand. I looked at his increasingly pale face and said each word slowly and clearly. Ethan, you don't not understand marriage. You just always knew Charlotte would forgive you. Well, not anymore. His Adam's apple bobbed, as if he wanted to say something, but I'd already picked up my scissors again. Get out, Charlotte. I said, get out. After that day, Ethan and I entered a standoff. He refused to sign the divorce papers. He also refused to publicly cut ties with Lila. But he started showing up everywhere I was. Sometimes he'd stand outside my studio at night with a carton of the milk I used to like. Sometimes he'd have his assistant ring my favorite crab soup dumplings for lunch. Sometimes he'd just sit in his car, waiting for me to finish working late, then follow me all the way back to my apartment. The irony was that for all those years I'd begged for his attention. He'd never given it to me freely. Now that I didn't want it anymore, he'd suddenly learned how to be romantic. But it was too late. I didn't take any of it. I gave the milk to the cleaning lady, the dumplings to the girls in the studio, And I ignored his car completely. Ethan had never been ignored by me before. And his face got darker every day. The thing that pushed everything over the edge was the night before the Blossom Thread anniversary show. It was 10 o'clock at night. And I was still in the studio checking samples when Lila walked in. She was wearing a white coat with light makeup on. She looked even more tired and fragile than the last time I'd seen her. The girls in the studio tried to stop her, but she said softly, "I just need to talk to Charlotte for 2 minutes." I told everyone to leave and sat down at my pattern-making table, not standing up. "Talk." Lila stood across from me, her eyes red. "Charlotte, I'm begging you to drop the lawsuit against Blossom Thread. The anniversary show means everything to Ethan. If you do this, you'll ruin him. I'm the one ruining him. If you hadn't kept pushing, none of this would have happened." I looked at her and smiled. "You know what's funny about people like you? You take what isn't yours, and then blame the other person for not being generous enough." Her face turned white, and she gripped her handbag tightly. "I didn't want to take anything from you. Then why did you wear my wedding dress?" "I just wanted to see if Ethan still cared about me." I froze. She actually admitted it. Lila looked like she'd given up. And the mask of vulnerability finally cracked. "I'm not like you, Charlotte. I've always known that men's love is worthless, so I have to test it. I tested my ex-fiance. And now I'm testing Ethan. I just didn't expect him to care this much." She even smiled a little as she said it. A cold, sharp smile. "You know what he said? He said, 'It's just a dress. Charlotte will let you have it.'" My chest tightened. I'd heard Ethan say those words myself, but hearing them from Lila's mouth was like being slapped in the face. Even she knew that in Ethan's mind, I was the one who would always give in. So, I pushed down the anger and looked at her. "Did you get the answer you wanted? Are you happy now?" Layla was silent for a second, then stepped closer. "Actually, I came here to tell you something else. Ethan never forgot about me. He only married you because I wasn't here. Now that I'm back, you know who he really wants." I looked at her and slowly put my scissors down on the table. "Layla, do you enjoy this?" She blinked. "Stealing other people's things to prove you're more loved." I stood up and walked toward her. "One step at a time. Then remember this. What you just proved isn't how valuable you are. It's how cheap Ethan is." Her face changed drastically. She clearly hadn't expected me to say that. And her lips trembled. "Charlotte, you..." "Anne." I stared into her suddenly tearful eyes. My voice soft but deadly clear. "Don't flatter yourself. The only reason you were able to hurt me is because I once thought Ethan was worth loving. But not anymore. So take him. A man who can't respect boundaries doesn't deserve anyone better than you." All the color drained from Lila's face. She bit her lip hard, and tears welled up in her eyes. Then, suddenly, she raised her hand and slapped herself hard across the face. I didn't even have time to react. 5 red finger marks appeared instantly on her cheek, and tears poured down her face. At that exact moment, the studio door was thrown open. Ethan stood in the doorway, his face like thunder. He strode in and pulled Lila into his arms, then turned to me, his eyes blazing with fury. "Charlotte, are you insane?" I looked at Lila's tear-streaked face and almost laughed. "Did you see me touch her?" "I only saw her crying her eyes out in your studio." "Then you need to get your eyes checked." Ethan's face got even colder. Lila grabbed his sleeve, sobbing uncontrollably. "Ethan, don't blame Charlotte. It's my fault. I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have said those things to upset her. I deserve it." The more she cried, the angrier Ethan got. I stood there. And suddenly I didn't even want to explain anymore. Because I knew the truth. People who are biased don't care about evidence. They only care about who they want to protect first. Sure enough, Ethan's next words were, "Apologize to Lila." I stared at him, not moving. Then I said quietly, "What did you say?" I said, "Apologize to her." "Why?" "Because you humiliated her and made her hit herself." I almost laughed out loud. So Lila had slapped herself. But the sound that echoed in my heart was Ethan's words. biased and unforgivable. I didn't hit her. And I didn't make her hit herself. I said, believe what you want. Is it really that hard to say you're sorry? Yes. I nodded. It is. And I'll tell you something, Elsesh's a great actress. Next time, tell her to do it somewhere else. This studio is for making dresses, not for drama. Lila cried even harder. Ethan looked at me like I was a stranger. Charlotte, I never realized how cruel you are. Cruel. It felt like a knife had been twisted in my chest. Not a sharp pain, but a dull, clear one. So in his mind, my self-defense was cruelty, and their constant disrespect was just a misunderstanding. I nodded and said softly, you're right. So now, take your first love and get out of my studio. Ethan didn't move. I turned and pressed the security button. Call security. Charlotte. Ethan's voice was low and dangerous. Are you sure you want to do this? You're the one who started this. I looked at him. Each word sharp as a knife. I'll be at the anniversary show tomorrow. And you better be ready to see what doing this really looks like. The next night, the Blossom Thread anniversary show went ahead as planned. It was held in a converted warehouse art center along the Embarcadero. All the lights, media, and investors were there. Ethan stood backstage in a sharp suit, looking perfectly composed on the surface. If it weren't for the dark circles under his eyes, I would have thought the divorce and the scandal hadn't affected him at all. When I walked backstage in a black blazer dress, everyone froze. Even Ethan hadn't expected me to come. He walked over immediately, his voice low. What are you doing here? Watching the show. Charlotte, don't do anything stupid. When have I ever done anything stupid that you didn't force me to do? I walked past him, and my eyes fell on the closing wedding dress hanging on a mannequin in the center of the backstage area. It wasn't my original dress. It was a commercial copy, made from my design. The neckline, the waist, the train, everything was almost identical, except the hidden embroidery my mother had sewn by hand had been replaced with machine stitching. It was a beautiful fake. I stood in front of that dress for 2 seconds, then turned to Ethan. Do you know the difference between a fake and the real thing? He didn't say anything. The real thing breaks your heart once, and you never forget it. A fake is just a dress, no matter how many times you wear it. Ethan's face changed. Charlotte, we'll talk after the show. No need to wait. As soon as I finished speaking, the large screens backstage went black. A second later, every screen in the entire venue switched. The opening video that was supposed to play the brand story was replaced with a series of photos. The first frame was the photo of Lila in my wedding dress, lying in my bed. The audience erupted. Flashbulbs exploded from the media section. Ethan's face turned white, and he spun around, shouting, "Who put that up? Cut it now. Cut it." But it was too late. The second photo was a close-up of the foundation stain on the waist of my dress. The third was a photo of Ethan's back as he untied Lila's dress. The fourth was my infringement statement. The fifth was screenshots of all the transfers, expenses, and rent payments Ethan had made to Lila. The venue was in complete chaos. Mr. Carter, are these allegations true? Is Ms. Bennett a secret partner of the brand? Or is she being personally supported by you? Is the closing dress a copy of Ms. Hale's personal design? The questions came thick and fast. Ethan's face was ashen. He started to run toward the control room, but I picked up the backstage microphone first. Good evening, everyone. When I spoke, the room fell quiet. Every camera turned to me. My name is Charlotte Hale. I'm the founding designer of Blossom Thread, and the copyright holder of the original design for tonight's closing dress. I stood under the lights, looking out at the sea of shocked and excited faces. My voice clear and steady. This was supposed to be just a fashion show. I didn't want to bring my personal life into work, but someone decided to use my wedding dress for a trending topic, my work for marketing, and my marriage for clickbait. So if that's how you want to play it, don't blame me for telling the whole truth. A reporter shouted out. Ms. Hale, is the photo of the bed real? It's real. The audience gasped. I held the microphone and continued. The dress was mine. The bed was mine. No one has the right to touch either without permission. Unfortunately, some people don't understand boundaries, and some people don't understand marriage, which is why, effective immediately, I am terminating all exclusive rights to my original couture designs for Blossom Thread. All infringement related to tonight's closing dress will be handled by my legal team. Ethan looked up sharply, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. Charlotte, do you have any idea what you're doing? I know exactly what I'm doing. I turned to look at him. I also know that this closing dress was your pitch to the new investors. You bet everything on this show to get the next round of funding. Too bad. Fakes can never live up to the real thing. No matter how hard you try. For the first time in front of all those people, all the color drained from his face. Backstage was dead silent. A second later, Lila ran out of the dressing room. She was wearing the commercial copy of the closing dress, her face deathly pale, but her eyes blazing with desperation. Charlotte, how long are you going to keep this up? Tears streamed down her face. I have nothing left. Why won't you just leave me alone? All the cameras turned to her instantly. She stood under the lights in her white dress, looking like a bride who'd been pushed to the edge. What an actress. If I hadn't been the one she'd stepped on, I might have believed her. I looked at her calmly. Do you really have nothing left? You have his loyalty, his money, the dream he gave you with my wedding dress, and the heart that chose you over his own wife even when he was getting divorced. Layla, you have everything, except the decency not to steal what belongs to other people. She froze, her eyes darting away, but then she started crying again. I never wanted to steal your husband. Really. I took a brown envelope from Sam and pulled out a stack of printed chat logs, holding them up to the nearest camera. Then explain why you told your friend that Ethan is the kind of man who feels guilty forever, and that if you wanted him, he'd give you everything eventually. Lila went completely rigid. Ethan also froze, staring at those papers as if he'd been struck by lightning. I turned the page. And this one. You said, trying on her dress was just the first step. I want to see how far he'll go for me. And this one is my favorite. You said, if Ethan actually divorces her for me, then coming back was worth it. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Lila's face was as white as a sheet. No, that's not. Are you going to say the chat logs are fake? Sam stepped forward, her voice cold. They've already been notarized. If you have a problem with them, you can say it in court. Ethan slowly turned to look at Lila. I knew that look. It wasn't love. It wasn't pity. It was the look of someone whose dream had just shattered, and who was finally seeing the truth. Lila must have seen it too, because she cried and grabbed his arm. Ethan, please listen to me. I was just talking nonsense. I never meant to break up your marriage. Enough. Ethan only said 2 words. His voice was soft, but colder than ice. Lila's fingers slipped from his arm, and all the color left her face. I watched this long overdue collapse, and I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. If she hadn't kept pushing me, I wouldn't have had to do this. But some people never learn. You back down once, and they take 3 steps forward. You don't fight back, and they never stop hurting you. The show was canceled immediately. The investors left that night. The next day, the newspapers were full of negative stories about Blossom Thread. The funding Ethan had dreamed of was gone forever. 3 days after the show, I launched my own independent brand. I called it Mountain View. Not Blossom Thread. Not Ethan. Not marriage. Just me. On the day of the brand launch, I didn't invite any celebrities or influencers. I only invited the 3 girls who'd been with me from the very beginning of my studio. And 10 ordinary brides. Some had just gotten married. Some were starting over after divorce. Some were single mothers. Some were 40 years old and buying their first formal dress for themselves. I called the launch event for myself. The closing piece wasn't a wedding dress. It was a white gown, made from my old wedding dress. I'd removed the train, shortened the skirt, and replaced the stained and damaged tulle with new lace I'd embroidered myself. Inside the waist, I'd sewn a new line of text. Love yourself first. when the lights came up. I stood backstage and heard someone call my name. I turned around. It was Ethan. He stood at the end of the hallway, with dark circles under his eyes and gaunt cheeks, like he hadn't slept in days. I frowned instinctively. How did you get in here? I needed to see you. You've seen me. Now leave. He didn't move. His eyes fell on the altered gown, and his Adam's apple bobbed. You changed the dress. Yeah. Why? I looked at him and almost laughed at the question. It was dirty. What else was I supposed to do? Keep it as a souvenir. His face turned white. The word dirty hit him harder than anything else I'd said, shattering the calm he'd been trying to maintain. Charlotte. His voice was hoarse. I know I messed up. It wasn't just this time. I walked over to him, standing a foot away. You messed up every single time you had to choose. I admit I was stupid about Lila. He stared at me, his eyes filled with exhaustion. I thought I was just helping her. I thought I could keep things under control. But you couldn't. No. He said quietly. I couldn't. Then there's nothing left to say. He was silent for a long time, then asked, if she hadn't come back, would we still be together? I'd asked myself that question 100 times. If Lila had never come back, would we have kept going? Living our nice, proper life until we were old. But I'd finally realized the truth. The problem was never Lila coming back. The problem was that Ethan had never closed the door on her. No, I said, giving him the honest answer. Because she wasn't the problem. She just showed me who you really are, Ethan. She didn't steal you from me. You left the door open for her the whole time. His eyelashes trembled, as if those words had cut him deeper than any knife. If I close the door now, is it too late? Yes. Why? Because I already left. I turned to walk away. Ethan called out after me. Charlotte. I paused, but didn't turn around. That dress. His voice was so hoarse I could barely hear him. Is it really gone forever? I looked at the altered white gown glowing under the lights ahead and smiled faintly. The dress is gone, and so are we. But Ethan, you lost something far more valuable than a dress. After the launch event, the orders for Mountain View exploded. The back end crashed from the number of pre-orders, and Sam sat next to me holding her laptop, laughing like a maniac. Charlotte, this is what karma looks like. Ethan destroyed your dress, and now he gets to watch you become a huge success without him. How does it feel? I signed order confirmations until my wrist ached. And I really did feel good. Not because I'd won against him, but because I'd finally pulled myself out of that rotten relationship. The next day, the divorce case went to court. Ethan didn't fight it. He gave up most of the disputed property and agreed to repay all the money he'd spent on Lila. When the judge asked if he agreed to the divorce, he was silent for a long time. So long that the whole courtroom went quiet. Finally, he said quietly, I agree. When those two words were spoken, I didn't feel the relief I'd expected. I just felt empty, like a long rain had finally stopped. But the sky was still gray when we walked out of the courthouse. The sun was bright and harsh. Sam hugged me. It's over. I hummed in agreement. But as we walked down the steps, I heard footsteps behind me. Ethan had followed us out. Charlotte. I stopped and turned to look at him. He was wearing a black suit, standing in the sunlight outside the courthouse, looking thinner than ever. He'd lost all the confidence and swagger he'd had before, leaving only exhaustion and regret. But regret gets old after a while. Is there something else? I asked. He looked at me, like he had a million things to say, but in the end, he only asked one question. Will you still make wedding dresses? That question surprised me. After everything, he hadn't asked if I hated him. He hadn't asked for another chance. He'd asked if I'd still make wedding dresses. I thought about it for a second and said, yes. A flicker of light crossed his eyes, then faded away. That's good. I didn't say anything. He swallowed hard and said quietly, I always thought wedding dresses were just your work. I finally realized they were the thing you used to believe in marriage. My chest tightened slightly. For the first time, he'd actually gotten it right. But it was too late. Ethan, I said, looking at him, The thing I can never forgive you for isn't that you let Lila wear my dress. He blinked. It's that you chose her over me so easily. Every single time. So easily that you never even stopped to think that I might hurt. He froze, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. I didn't wait for him to say anything. I turned and walked down the steps. As I reached the bottom, I heard him say very quietly behind me, "I'm sorry." The sun shone brightly on the ground, almost blinding. I didn't stop walking. Some apologies can buy you a meal, or an argument, or even a second chance at love, but they can't buy back a heart that's already turned cold. The first winter after my divorce, I moved my studio to a new location. The second floor was for exhibitions. The first floor was the workshop. And in the back I had a small room just for my mother's old sewing machine. On opening day, the place was packed. Old clients brought flowers, and brides lined up to get measured. I didn't get a break until 9 o'clock that night. I was about to get a glass of water when my assistant ran over holding a box. "Charlotte, someone left this at the door. Said they had to give it to you personally." I frowned and took the box. It was light. When I opened it, there was an old silver brooch inside. It was the brooch I'd pinned to the inside of my wedding dress on our wedding day. I'd lost it years ago and never found it. Under the brooch was a note, in familiar handwriting. I found it in the crack of the bed. "It belongs to you, Ethan." I stared at the brooch for a long time, then tore up the note and put the brooch in a drawer. My assistant was staring at me with wide eyes. "Charlotte, who was that from?" "My ex-husband." She immediately shut up, looking scared. I laughed. "Don't worry, ex-husbands don't bite." She whispered, "Do you still miss him?" I closed the drawer and smoothed down my sleeves. I did, but not anymore. After everyone left that night, I stayed in the workshop alone with the lights on. On the table was a new design sketch. It was a simple white dress, no train, no veil, just clean lines and a perfect waist. I stared at that sketch and thought about a lot of things. I thought about my mother sewing that last stitch by lamplight, the fine lines around her eyes. I thought about the first time I'd put on that wedding dress and looked in the mirror, thinking I was about to live happily ever after. I thought about the night I'd walked into the bedroom and seen Lila in my dress, and Ethan saying, "It's just a dress." A woman doesn't become strong by never getting hurt. She becomes strong by getting hurt, and finally learning what's worth fighting for and what isn't. Wedding dresses are precious, but far more precious is the woman who wears it, and the heart she's willing to give. Mountain View grew more and more successful. The following spring, I got a very special order. The client was a 38-year-old woman who'd been divorced and had a 7-year-old daughter. She wanted a white dress, not for a wedding, but to take photos with her daughter on her birthday. She sat across from me, looking nervous. "Ms. Hale, is it okay for someone like me to wear white?" I looked at her and thought about myself. All those months ago, I thought about all the times I'd been shamed, and told to be quiet, and forced to be the bigger person. I smiled and picked up my measuring tape. "Of course it is. Who said white is only for weddings?" She blinked, and tears filled her eyes. After I finished measuring her, she stood at the door holding her daughter and said thank you. The little girl looked up at me and asked, "Auntie, will you get married again?" I knelt down and fixed her crooked hair clip, smiling. "Maybe, if I meet someone who's worth it." "What if you don't?" I looked into her bright black eyes and said softly, "Then that's okay too, because you can be your own gift, all by yourself." The little girl nodded, not quite understanding, but her mother started crying. After they left, I stood by the glass door and looked out at the spring sunshine, feeling peaceful. I'd finally reached that point. When I thought about marriage now, I didn't feel pain, or anger, or that empty feeling like something had been torn out of my chest. I just felt calm. A few months later, Sam sent me a photo. It was taken at a cocktail party. Ethan was sitting in the corner, drinking alone. His suit was still perfect, but his face was empty. She only wrote one line. He cut all ties with Lila, sold most of his shares in Blossom Thread. I looked at the photo and replied with a single okay. Sam called me immediately. That's it. Just okay. What else am I supposed to say? Don't you want to know how miserable he is? How much he regrets it? I was trimming a piece of tulle with my scissors. My voice calm. Sam, the thing about funerals is that by the time the fire starts, the person's already gone. She was silent for 2 seconds, then laughed. God. You're brutal now. I laughed too. Yeah, I used to hold back. Afraid of hurting people's feelings. Afraid of being too sharp. Afraid of breaking things. But I finally learned that it's not a woman's sharpness that breaks relationships. It's a man's greed. In the autumn, I got a call from an unknown number. It was quiet on the other end for several seconds. Then a familiar voice spoke. Charlotte. It's me. My hands paused on the fabric. What do you want? My mother's in the hospital. Ethan's voice was hoarse. She wants to see you. I looked down at the needle and thread in my hands and said calmly, why would she want to see me? She says she wants to apologize. I thought about the day I'd left with my suitcase, and Margaret standing in the doorway saying, if you hadn't married him, you'd still be nobody. Some words are light when you say them, but they leave scars that last forever. Ethan, I said, pushing the needle through the fabric and tying a tight knot. If she really wanted to apologize, she would have said it before I left. Not now. Charlotte, don't call me again about this. I hung up the phone and put it down. The wind blew in through the window, carrying the faint scent of maple leaves. I thought about that autumn when we'd first gotten married. Ethan had stood outside my studio waiting for me to finish work, holding a huge bouquet of white lysianthus, and said, Charlotte, I'll bring you flowers every autumn for the rest of our lives. I couldn't even remember if he'd kept that promise. That's the thing about pain. You remember every second of it. But when the pain is gone, even the happy memories fade away. I sewed the last stitch on the new piece of tulle, turned it over, and cut off the loose thread. The stitches were neat and tight, like a heart that had finally been mended. Just before closing time that night, my assistant came over to me, looking curious. Charlotte, can I see that brooch in your drawer? It's so pretty. I opened the drawer and handed it to her. She held it in her hands and turned it over, then gasped, there's writing on the back. I froze. I took it from her and turned it over. On the back of the silver pin, in tiny, delicate handwriting that I would have recognized anywhere, was a line of text. It was my mother's handwriting. For the one who is chosen unconditionally. I stared at those words, and my eyes filled with tears. My mother had hidden the answer for me in the dress, and in the brooch, all along. I just hadn't seen it back then, when I'd been so sure that love could conquer everything. But it wasn't too late to see it now. I put the brooch back in its box and closed it gently. My assistant looked at me. What does it mean, Charlotte? I smiled, my voice soft. It means you should never wear a wedding dress for a love that's only half-hearted. She nodded, still a little confused. I looked at my reflection in the glass window. The lights fell on me, bright and clear. There was no one standing beside me, no one making choices for me, and for the first time, I felt more beautiful than I had on my wedding day. People still talk about Ethan and me sometimes. They say, what a shame. They were such a perfect couple. I hear them, and I just smile. Only I know it wasn't a shame. The real shame would have been staying, letting myself be disrespected, and pretending it was okay. I'm glad I didn't do that. I'm glad I took that dirty, broken dress and turned it into something new. Something that was just mine. And I'm glad I finally learned. The best bride isn't the one standing in a wedding dress waiting for someone to love her. It's the one who stands in the light, all by herself, and is already whole.